What can the Rams learn from their last trade of Jalen Ramsey? And also, the Rams are picked to finish second in the division behind the 49ers. Why is that? We'll tell you why. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramley, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your Los Angeles Rams, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, do me a huge favor, join the party, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, hit the like button. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade, 24/7 sports, Bleacher Report, SI, Dodgers Nation, Locked On. As always, I'm joined by the Rams pre-half and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio station. And he also does a fantastic morning show you got to listen to with DeMarco Farr on ESPN Radio every single morning starting at 9 a.m. Pacific. The great Travis Rogers, the People's Champ. You can follow him on X at Travis Rogers. And on today's show, the Rams are predicted to finish behind the 49ers in the division. Also, their percentage chances of winning the Super Bowl are revealed. We're going to start with Jalen Ramsey. Now, Travis, this show over the last month, it's turned into Locked On Rams. No, it's more like Locked On Ramsey with how much we've talked about the possibility of trading for the former All-Pro cornerback. But let's be honest here. As far as moves that they could still make, that could elevate them, that can upgrade them in a position of need, Jalen Ramsey is certainly a guy that can do that. And what really kind of blows my mind is how open the organization, guys like Leslie and Sean McVay, have been about talking about this, about discussing this. And McVay even said recently that those conversations are ongoing. I mean, for them to be so out in the open lets you know that they are interested in the player, and it's just about getting the logistics, the contract, the draft pick, waiting until June 1st and things like that to try to strike a deal.
Yeah, it really does feel like that, doesn't it? It just feels like, I don't want to say that it feels like something is done and you just need to wait for that date to come up, like you just suggested, Doug, that June 1st kind of unlocks some things that you can do just logistically with contracts and everything else. But I agree with you. It's really unusual to see a team talk about a player on another team as openly as the Rams are talking about Jalen Ramsey. And maybe it has something to do with the fact that he's been here previously. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that Ramsey and the Dolphins have been as open about, him moving on to another destination as they've been. But it really is odd. It just feels like you just need to get past a certain date and then, okay, we're good. Yep. Okay, done deal. Like, it doesn't feel like there's a ton of negotiations taking place. It's just waiting for a certain date to pop. And I can't wait. I think it's an incredibly exciting opportunity. I know what it looked like the first time he came through here. And maybe he's not exactly that same player, but he's still a very good player and somebody I anticipate making a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people have talked about that weight. We've got a lot of questions down below in the comments about why it would be a June 1st trade situation. It's pretty simple. His cap number, it's at 16.7 right now, 16.7 million right now for the Dolphins in 2025, but that would go to 25.2 million if he's traded before June 1st because his signing bonus is no longer spread out over the next couple of years. Now that cap number would go down to 6.7 million with the remaining 18.5 million on the books for 2026. If the trade went down after June 1st, that would definitely make it where it wouldn't involve the 2025 pick compensation as well. But I mean, it's just all finances at that point. A lot of stuff that a lot of fans don't care about, but a lot of fans do care about too, right? I mean, the nerds like us and things like that. But the truth is, it's more about the player and what that player can do for this team in 2025. I mean, that's really what I'm focused on because, look, is he worth a late round pick? I mean, a couple of years ago, he was better and they traded him for a third round pick. Now you're looking at a fifth or sixth round pick, but it's kind of the financial commitment of over $20 million and also the pressure of possibly a new contract after that. But if I'm Les Snead, if I'm Sean McVay, I'm looking at the secondary right now. And yes, it's serviceable. Yes, they won their division. Yes, they won a playoff game with Kobe Durant, Nikello Witherspoon, Darius Williams, guys like that. You have Darion Kendrick and Emmanuel Forbes, guys like that coming back. But you look at Darius Williams. Last year, he allowed a 101.7 passer rating coverage last year. He did not have the year that they had hoped he would have. Kobe Durant still hasn't fully realized that potential that we thought he had a couple seasons ago. And there's just too many question marks for a secondary if you truly are all in. So that's the question. Are they truly all in? If the answer is yes, then Jalen Ramsey makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think that's it exactly. I think what you talked about there is incredibly important, that this is not a deal that is done for a new contract for Jalen Ramsey or what he gets after this deal expires. It has nothing to do with that. Like, unlike what it was when they traded for him from Jacksonville a number of years ago, and it was multiple firsts, and this was something that was going to be set up for many seasons to come, and we're going to continue to have one of the best corners in the league. That was then. What this is right now, and this is kind of set up the same way that Matthew Stafford is set up, maybe Devontae Adams is set up, just some of these guys, there's some real big names, some guys that are, stars in this league. This is a short-term play. This is not something that's done so the Rams could be set up for a great deal of success or flexibility or optionality in 2028 or 2031. This is to see what happens in 2025. Take a shot at winning a Super Bowl right now. That I think one of the things that fills me with a great deal of confidence as a Rams fan is the Rams have, I think, demonstrated a really good ability to know when they're close, a really good ability to know then, okay, not now, okay, right now. And I think that they're in that spot where it's right now. And that means I think that has a lot to do with why they did what they did in the draft, to get another draft pick, to maybe spend this year to get a player that maybe they want. I think it speaks to Jalen Ramsey. I think it's why they gave Devontae Adams an opportunity here. I think it's why Matthew Stafford is back at the number that he's back. This is all set up for they believe they have a shot right now. And when they've thought they've had a shot before, they usually did. They usually were one of the better teams in the conference, have gone to the Super Bowl a couple of times. So when they can kind of smell it in the air and they go for it, it's a really good sign. And I think Ramsey falls right smack in the middle of the bullseye for that pattern.
Absolutely. And a wise man once said, don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. Well, I'm listening to what they're saying and watching what they're doing, because they're saying they're interested in Jalen Ramsey, and what they're doing is not drafting a quarterback. So what they tell you is, hey, we're not going to draft a corner, because we understand that known commodities like a Jalen Ramsey are more valuable than draft picks, or more valuable than young corners that you're hoping could work out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, if you thought that your window was going to kick open in 2027, then you don't go get Jalen Ramsey. You draft a quarterback, or cornerback, I should say, a month or so ago. That this is like you said. What are they doing? What they're doing is they're setting up their hand to be played right now, not a couple of years from now. Now, the Rams have done a great job of being able to kind of live in both worlds, which I've said before too, is I think the hardest thing in any sport to do is be good today, but don't worry, but don't be bad tomorrow. That's very, very difficult to do. I think the Rams have done about as good a job of that as you could hope for, but they've really loaded up on the defensive side. We've seen what they've done up front. It's incredibly exciting. They're a little bit older on the offensive side, but I think all signs are they're going to go for it. I don't think that the Ramsey thing is like the last piece of the puzzle. I think it's the first thing that they do in what it's going to be. And the completed process may not be until the middle of the season, whenever the trade deadline comes up. The Rams have always been really aggressive in that trade market. So I think this is just the next move that they make to try to put together a really big swing to go get back to a Super Bowl level team.
Absolutely. That's where that pick that they got from the Falcons in the Pierce deal, trading down out of the 2025 draft. They still got their guy Ferguson in the next round. Really comes in handy because you can find that missing piece when the year is still ongoing at the trade deadline. So I love that as well, for sure. But coming up next, what is the number one thing that the Rams can learn from their first trade of Jalen Ramsey? And also the Rams not picked to win the division. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
The NBA playoffs are still going strong. Every single night is delivering highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, what up, Knicks, and can't-miss moments. So whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, Tyrese Halliburton, there's never been a better time to get in on all of your NBA playoff action. Oh, by the way, everything I'm saying about the NBA, go ahead and put it on the NHL as well. All true. Makes it incredibly easy to stay in the game with FanDuel before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and big win. And how about this? How about if your first $5 bet hits? Then you get $200 in bonus bets. So if you've got a feel on who's getting hot, if you got a feel on what's about to happen next, why not back it up with a same-game parlay? If you're new to FanDuel, it is the perfect time to sign up. There's no better time to sign up. Here's how you do it. You go to FanDuel.com, you place your first $5 bet, and if it hits, if you win, you get $200 in bonus bets. So make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
And we are off and running here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also want to send a special shout out to those everyday listeners out there watching, listening to every single episode of Locked On Rams. Cannot thank you enough. And if you're new to the channel, got a lot of new subscribers, viewers, listeners, join the party, join the Everyday Listeners Club, and you won't miss a thing about your Los Angeles Rams. All right, Travis, so kind of going back to the Ramsey trade, I guess the number one thing you can learn from that first deal is you just got to be careful with the contract that you might sign him to, because we know that's always going to be a topic of conversation. We know he wants to be paid and compensated as an elite player. Is he an elite player at this part of his career, at this stage? I would say the answer is no. Can he still have flashes of that at times? I think that's certainly the case. But the difference is the first time they made the trade, they took on a $19.6 million in money when he was traded, and it was just 2 years into his 5-year deal. Now he has cash hits at $25 million, $21 million, and $22 million for the next 3 seasons. So I think that's kind of the big question for the Rams, is kind of like, what is the out on this deal? How much flexibility do they have for him? Because I look at Ramsey, I look at Devontae Adams, I look at Matthew Stafford, and for me, it's, hey, let's maximize this window. But, I mean, it's kind of, I'm here for a good time, not a long time.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of what I'm hoping for with this is it's kind of the ultimate thing for Rams fans. And I think that not a lot of organizations have their team builds it's just kind of planned out like this, where you can enjoy a Super Bowl run, but it doesn't burn you down and you're completely down to the studs rebuild. You can kind of have the future and the present. Hopefully that is maintained even if they do make this deal.
Yeah, what's interesting is they really haven't had to go through a rebuild since they won the Super Bowl. They had a terrible season after the Super Bowl, but that wasn't by design. That wasn't by, hey, look, we got to get rid of players, X, Y, and Z, and we got to go into the draft, and we're just going to kind of come in here and, buckle our chin straps and get through a couple of rough years. They had a rough year, but it was mostly because guys were dropping left and right. You go back to that season after the Super Bowl where their entire offensive line was completely destroyed. So that kind of took care of itself. And then what was supposed to be the rebuild the following season really wasn't. They were much better than I think anybody honestly could have expected. And now we know what happened last year. And all of a sudden they went from they might be okay to, hey, they were the only team that gave Philadelphia a run for their money in the postseason, to here we are now where it feels like you're right back in where you were a couple of years ago and you got to go for it. I think that this is where being a Rams fan is an advantage. They've done this before. They've been here before. It doesn't mean it's going to work out exactly right. It doesn't mean that this year's Von Miller is waiting for you, or this year's Odell Beckham Jr. is waiting for you, or the breakout stars that we saw before are going to have the same impact. But the vibes are the same, for lack of a better word. This feels really familiar, and Ramsey's a huge part of that. And I think they understand that this isn't something that you're doing for, I like how you said it. This is not a long-term play. This is we got a pretty good hand at the table. Let's play it and see what happens. Now, no guarantees, but we got a good hand. Let's play it and go. And Ramsey strengthens the hand. He's not what he was even 2 or 3 years ago, but he's better than what they have. And I think that's probably ultimately where they get to, and ultimately what they want to do is get a little better. And, I think if you and I were being honest about this, that's the position group that probably needs to get the best. They clearly don't really value linebackers the way that some other teams do. Their front is really good. Their offense is really good. Their offensive line, while maybe a little thin, the guys they have is pretty good. Kyron Williams is good. Your receiver group is good. You drafted the tight end. Well, where's the weak spot? It's in the back end of the defense, and Jalen Ramsey can really help fill some of or take some of that pressure off, I should say. So I think they do it, but I don't think this is something that they're planning on being a solution to the problem beyond this first season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all those things make sense with their timeline, right? I mean, it's not just that he is a former All-Pro, he's their former All-Pro, right? He's someone that understands their system, understands their standard, their culture, and all those things should really be turnkey for him. I think kind of the angle that always kind of needs to be hit with Jalen Ramsey, and it's a conversation that kind of goes all over the place based on if it's a player, coach. I mean, he went from being a locker room cancer with the Jaguars, where he's arguing with Doug Marrone, wants a new contract. I mean, that Jaguar secondary was the best in the sport. There was a lot of friction there. And he comes to LA, and then he becomes one of Sean McVay's favorite players to coach.
There you go.
And there's some stories that after the Super Bowl, I've heard stories after the Super Bowl that he didn't want to do any interviews because he didn't feel like he had a good game. He wasn't that happy and this and that. I mean, what's your take? I mean, genuinely, just like kind of like, what is your take? My take is, look, superstars are treated differently. If you're great, you get away with certain things. And I don't care what you're like, as long as the performance is there. I think just his presence and his standard can elevate young players. And I think he can turn a young secondary into some bulls. But I mean, just kind of what is your kind of take on that?
Yeah, so you mentioned the show I do with DeMarco each day on ESPN, and DeMarco obviously, is still an employee of the Rams, does a lot of work with the Rams, is a sideline reporter for the Rams, is a former Ram, and he uses a term that I really like, and it's barn boss. And it's something that you got a guy in there that everybody just kind of, okay, he's going to set the tone, and he's going to be the guy that just kind of shows you how it is. That was Aaron Donald forever, right? Aaron Donald was the barn boss, and he was a guy that could say to Jalen Ramsey, if Jalen Ramsey was going to have a moment where all those things that you mentioned, maybe we're going to percolate into LA, Aaron Donald wasn't going to let it happen. Well, Sean McVay is the barn boss now. And Sean McVay is an established guy in this league. Sean McVay is a guy that does not get run over by players. He's not Doug Marrone. He's not going to have something like that go on. And quite frankly, the dynamic is tipped back in the other direction, where Jalen Ramsey, to your point, Doug, when you got a special talent, deserves special considerations. And if you're making all sorts of plays and you're an All-Pro and you're headed to the Hall of Fame and all these things, and you don't want to do this, that, and the other, all right, we're going to learn to live with it. We'll work around it. But if that's not true, you can make other decisions. And I think Sean McVay is very comfortable making other decisions. I don't think he's going to get steamrolled by any of his players. I think that you're starting to see some younger guys. I don't know if Jared Verse is quite ready to step into that player barn boss role. It's only his second year in the league, but this is not the universe revolves around Jalen Ramsey. It's you get to be one of the parts of this. We need you. I think that your point about setting the tone in the secondary is really good, but the power dynamic has changed a little bit, and it rests with Sean McVay, and it always will as long as he's there. And look, Jalen Ramsey is an emotional player. I think that's what makes him a lot of what he is, but he's not dumb. He gets it. Like he knows what's up. He's going to fall in line if he needs to fall in line. And I have absolutely no concerns about bringing him back, because he knows what it's like here. He knows what he's signing up for. Sean McVay knows how to deal with it, and Sean McVay knows how to get the best out of him. I think there's risk in all this stuff, but I think the risk of bringing him back is really low.
Yeah, I'm with you on that standpoint too, because I think he knows what it's like to be on the other side. And he knows what it's like to be on a Super Bowl contender, and he kind of wants that feeling back, and he wants that roll back. And I think that's kind of where he would be at this stage of his career. He knows that there are more tomorrows than there's more yesterdays than tomorrows as far as his age at his position. And this would be the ultimate, oh my goodness, like I'm going back to the same spot. It's like deja vu. And hopefully you add another Super Bowl, and he's a big part of that. So yeah, we're waiting on that Schefter bomb, man. We're waiting on, I mean, who's going to break it, but it's probably going to be Adam Schefter, let's be honest.
Probably.
But Yeah. So
Well, I
hopefully,
like what you said too, Doug, that this is, I don't want to say it's Jalen Ramsey's last season in the league. I don't think that's what it is, but it might be his last really good chance to make a deep run in the playoffs. And he knows that. He knows what it's like to be on a winning team and to kind of dig in on something that meaningful. I wouldn't be surprised.
no doubt about it. And also, people don't need to do the Photoshops, the jersey swaps. I mean, it's already
there.
done. I can do some if you want. But coming up, we're actually going to talk about the division, though. We're going to talk about the division. The 49ers are predicted to win the division after the Rams off season, the year they had last year. We'll talk about why. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams. And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Okay, Travis, so here in our third segment, we're going to talk about the division. I think we're 102 days away from Rams football. It's crazy how quickly this is fast approaching. But ESPN, great company, greatest company ever. ESPN is giving the 49ers the advantage when it comes to their prediction to win the NFC West. They're giving the 49ers a 36% chance and the Rams a 34% chance. When you ask yourself, wait, why is that? Because they have the Rams higher on their football power index.
Well, yeah.
Well, it just comes down to strength of schedule.
Sure.
People are freaking out on Rams Reddit, Travis. By the way, they speak very highly of you and I on Rams Reddit. A lot of Locked On Rams fans over there. They're freaking out about this because the year that the Rams had last year, the offseason they've had, and there's the expectations. It just comes down to computers, analytics. Strength of schedule is important too.
Yeah.
The Rams take on the 49ers week 5 and week 10, and they're going to have all the opportunities to go out and win this division.
I think you nailed it. This is not that the Rams are not as good as the 49ers. It's that the Rams play a harder schedule than the 49ers, and the Rams might lose more games because they play better teams than the 49ers. They both get the AFC and NFC South, but it's those other those crossover games that are very different. The Rams get first place teams. The 49ers get fourth place teams. It's not super complicated. So I think that's mostly where it is. The other thing is, too, I know that the 49ers have lost a ton of good players. You saw a lot of talent leave. They still have a lot of talent, too, right? It's not like they are completely devoid of good players. They have good players, and a lot like the Rams, I believe in the infrastructure in San Francisco. I think that Kyle Shanahan is a very good coach. Kyle Shanahan knows how to get the best out of his guys. I don't expect him to have another down season like that. I think the big question is Brock Purdy and whether he's a real guy or he is a guy that is the beneficiary of having a bunch of really good players around him. I think we're going to get a better sense of that. I think the Rams are going to win the division. I think that you could take those other three teams and kind of throw them in a hat, and I think any of them could finish anywhere from 2 to 4. San Francisco, it feels to me like the dynamic has changed a little, Doug, that for the last 5-6 years or so, it's like, man, I don't know how we're going to beat those guys, that the Rams were just getting manhandled by them. And really, other than the NFC Championship game, it never felt like it was all that close. Last year kind of flipped that. I feel like the Rams really kind of flipped the script back on San Francisco in a real way. And these things tend to kind of go in cycles to last a couple of years. So my optimism in beating San Francisco straight up is much higher than it would have been a year ago at this time. And I think this is nothing more than the Rams have a more challenging schedule than the 49ers do. I think that's all this is. Yeah, absolutely. And that is the big question for me moving forward, too, is has the tide turned in the Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan matchup? Because McVay against Shanahan is 7-10 since 2017. But he has won the last 3 matchups. He won the one that matters most, of course, the 2021 NFC Championship game, where it went from bang, bang, Niner gang to bang, bang, escalator gang. And we know how that went down. But the truth is, I do think that it has changed a little bit. I mean, they've lost a little bit of their swagger. They've lost a little bit of that momentum. I mean, you look at all the teams that have the most postseason wins the last couple of years, the 49ers are the only one that hasn't won that Lombardi trophy, right? So they're the team that's still chasing that. And it just comes down to, look, I mean, the Rams, this actually my biggest number one takeaway from all was like, damn, the Rams schedule gets off to a really nice start. They have a chance to stack wins early, but man, it is not the easiest schedule in the grand scheme of things. If
teams perform like we think they will, I mean, you've faced the Eagles, the Ravens, and the Lions. I mean, you're playing a first place schedule, right? Heavy is the head that wears the crown, right?
Yep.
And they are victims of that, if you want to say that. And then you look at that 49ers team, you mentioned the matchups that they have. And so if that down year for them was just kind of a blip due to injuries, and they still have the culture and they still have the talent, the 49ers could be in a good position, if we're being just completely objective, to bounce back nicely this season and contend for this division.
Yeah, I think San Francisco, I don't want to say all of it, but a huge chunk of it rests on how healthy Christian McCaffrey is. If McCaffrey's healthy, they're going to be really good. If he's not, they'll be okay. And honestly, I think it's going to be much more interesting how the Rams do inside the division, across the board. I think Arizona they've gotten a lot better. I think that they're a team that Sean McVay has had a great deal of success against. The Rams over the last, 8-9 years have really taken advantage of their games against Arizona. It feels like the needles kind of come back a little bit more towards the middle there. The Cardinals beat them last year, and then that other game, the Rams kind of had to pull one out of the fire towards the end to beat them. Seattle, I think, is a big question mark. A new quarterback. Geno Smith is gone. Sam Darnold is in. DK Metcalf is gone. They're going through a transitional phase, but Seattle always seems to have, and anybody that listens to this show, the everydayer, certainly know this. I use this as a compliment. They have basic competency. They're pretty good. They're always pretty good. They're very rarely lousy. So the division, I think, is going to be a little more competitive than people might think, but they're going to win a bunch of games, the Rams. I think the entire division is going to be – you get to play the AFC and NFC South as your two crossover divisions. That's a lot of fat on that schedule. Now, they're non – like you mentioned, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Detroit. That's about as gnarly a schedule as you could ask for. But when you get those two other divisions, man, you're going to eat. And as long as you take care of business there, the rest of that stuff is just going to be a matter of seeding, because they're gonna win a bunch of games this year.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always injuries. There's always teams that underperform and overperform, sure. And all these are projections, and you got to take it with a grain of salt the size of Bruce Bochy's head. But still, I mean, the truth of the matter is yeah, we will know a lot early on in the information gathering stages of the first 5, 6, 7 weeks of the season. Will largely determine how tough the schedule is. But for the okay, what do you say, Travis?
No, I think you're that. I think one of the things that we kind of, for 2 years in a row, the Rams have gotten off to a really bad start, and they've had to absolutely be terrific through the second half of the schedule. I think they went 8-1 through their last 9 games 2 years ago. Last year they were super hot at the end of the year. That this could be one of those where you actually kind of flip it and get off to a pretty good start relatively early, and you just kind of play normal football towards the end. That they're not going to have to be, in frenzy mode towards the end. I think that's a good point you bring up, that they could get. They could put a little money in the bank through September and October, something they haven't been able to do the last couple of years.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, last year they started 1-4, had to overcome that. We thought it was over. But yeah, if you're a 49ers fan, and we know Aaron Donald, when he said, I really dislike the 49ers, he hated the 49ers. We know I'm going to get crazy comments down below how much fans hate the 49ers. If you want the stat to really just hurt them, and this is it. I mean, most playoff wins since 2010. The Rams have the 8th most at 8. But if you look at the teams, most playoff wins since 2010. Chiefs 18, Patriots 16, 49ers 13, Packers 12, Eagles 10, Ravens 10, Seahawks 10, Rams 8. Of all those teams, the 49ers are the only team of that bunch that has not won the Super Bowl. I mean, that is ultimate pain, right?
That's why. You know what else jumped out at me as you're doing that? 3 of those teams are in the NFC West.
Yeah, exactly, right?
That means that division is always pretty darn good, and that whoever is winning in that division also goes and wins in the playoffs. That you have 3 teams from the same division there, I think, is pretty impressive.
For me, what stands out too is one is so much better than none. You know what I mean? Like,
oh my gosh!
One, I don't need 3. I just need one is so much better than none.
Don't have 0. You know what I mean? Like it's and I know that it wasn't 0, but it kind of was 0. Think about Dave
Marino, right?
Right? Well, even though they got the one in the COVID season, everybody's like, yeah, okay, cool, whatever. And now that they beat the Yankees last year, it's like, yeah, man, it's cool. Like the last 10 years feel a lot better, even though it's one more title, but it's one more title, the one that matters. So yeah, 0 is never a good number.
Absolutely. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. And you can follow the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers, at Travis Rogers. And until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.